What's up, guys? I'm Uncle Freedom, coming to you on a glorious and well-deserved day off, and today we're going to talk about something that's come up more than once on videos where we talk about stockpiling things for SHTF, and that is guns last forever, right? Wrong. They don't. Without some sort of user-level maintenance and replacements done on your behalf to your firearm will quickly cease being a firearm and quickly become being a stick. I don't want to use it as a stick, because much less effective. So what about the guys who are going to say, well, I'm not really preparing for SHTF. Much like I've talked about the fact that the government doesn't really have to ban guns. They just have to make ammo, or the components to make ammo, so expensive to get that we can't afford to shoot. That's problem one. Problem two is a couple of years ago, or a few years ago, when they tried to pass that law that made it so that anything we tried to order as parts that went into a rifle had to go through an FFL. Combine that with the fact that FFLs are dropping like flies because of new government rules and sanctions, you can see where we would have a real problem getting the stuff to maintain firearms and build new ones, right? You have to keep this stuff on hand. So today we're going to go through three of the most common things: 2 handguns and a rifle. So first up, Glock. We're clear, right? Glocks last forever. These things are just known, tough, reliable quantities. You're right. They do last a very long time. I don't think I've ever seen anyone shoot out a Glock barrel, because 9mm, it's a pistol round. It's very low pressure. You're not burning a ton of powder, so it's not going to go. But here's the deal. As with all of these guns, you should be shooting them often, right? We should never neglect our training because we want the gun to last longer. That is really stupid. Like, we need to go out, and I need to be running this consistently at a high level to maintain my proficiency. And this goes back to that ammo stockpile video where everybody got up in arms that I would say I don't recommend stockpiling FMJ. They just missed the part of the video where I said I don't recommend stockpiling FMJ as your defensive ammo, right? Keep 100,000 rounds of full metal jacket on hand. Hell, I keep a lot, but I shoot a lot, right? Like, we have to train, we have to run these things, but I'm never going to pick that as my defensive load because better options exist. And I will budget and do what I have to do to shoot those better options if I need them. But a Glock, there's things that we do need to keep for a Glock. Now, here's the deal. At about 15 to 20,000 rounds, you're going to have to replace some stuff that you're probably never going to replace before that. But there are things that go wrong with these as part of the maintenance schedule. So, for example, if we look at my Glock 22, right, my 40 cal, this gun's got a lot of rounds on it. About every 2,000 rounds, the recoil assembly has to be replaced in this gun. And we're probably due for another one. It's feeling a little light. And that's because of just the way this system operates. So we're looking at about 2,000 rounds. I'm going to have to replace the recoil assembly in this gun to keep this gun running optimally. Will it suddenly stop running if I get to 2,300 rounds? No. It just feels worse. So, same thing, 357 Sig, because it's the same kind of pressure we've got going on here, about 2,000 rounds. However, everything else, 45-9, we're talking about somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 rounds. So every 3,000 to 4,000 rounds, we're going to pull the recoil guide rod assembly and spring. We're going to replace it. That part is readily accessible on Midway, Primary Arms, all these other places in the low teens for price. No, you don't need aftermarket ones, the tungsten guide rods and all that other BS. But having a couple of those on hand so that you can replace them every 3,000 rounds, be realistic about it. How much do you shoot your gun, right? This gun will probably see 15,000 rounds this year. So that means I'm going to burn probably 3, maybe 4 recoil guide rod assemblies. So I need to have those on hand. So inside of the Glock, we have the striker spring. So inside of your Glock handgun system, you have a striker channel in here and your striker spring itself, right? So the way your striker spring works is that is what draws the striker back, drops it onto things as we go. Your striker spring on your Glock needs to be done about every 10,000 rounds. So again, I'm going to do about one of those this year. What about your striker safety? So the little plunger we've got right here, it's a piece that people Man, filthy. It's a piece that people tend to replace when we're trying to smooth out trigger pulls on a Glock, but we're talking for that plunger spring. For that, we're also talking about for my extractor itself, as well as the spring-loaded bearing, the pin, the bearing, or the spring-loaded bearing, the extractor, plunger, spring, everything. That's about 10,000 rounds to 15,000 rounds, and then we go to 15,000 rounds. That's going to be our actual trigger spring inside of the trigger housing itself, your slide stop spring, and your slide stop because it's going to get chewed up, and then your mag catch. All of the parts I have just mentioned to you are very easy user serviceable parts, and total expense we're talking about in all of those parts I just mentioned is like $50 max. At $50, you have enough parts to completely rebuild your gun and respring everything at the 15,000 round mark. You keep 2 sets of those on hand, that is a substantial amount of ammo for the average normal guy, right? We're not talking about milling barrels because you're not going to kill a Glock barrel, but having those simple things for the Glock, your extractor, plunger, spring-loaded bearing, your extractor itself, because those do fail, having a trigger spring for the back of it, having an extra slide stop, having a mag catch and mag catch spring, having additional striker springs, having recoil guide rod assemblies because that's the fastest wearing part, and having like your plunger spring and stuff like that. For like $50, we literally have an entire kit of product that allows me to completely respring this firearm and put it back to factory new. It's easy to do, it's not that expensive, and it's general maintenance you need to be aware of as a gun owner. So get on Midway Primary Palmetto State, use the links, go over there, check those guys out, and start putting those pieces into your cart. Get it in your head what you need to have, because I would have at least one set of these on hand, because you never know, right? Next up, America's rifle, right? The good old venerable AR-15. There are parts of this that will not survive because it's just the nature of the beast. There are several parts that are going to get killed off on that thing really, really quickly. So things like our gas rings inside of our bolt carrier group, that's a 2,000 to 3,000 round part, man, max of 5. You're going to start killing those off, and you need to replace them because they can cause cycling reliability problems in your firearm. And if we're talking about we need it to work when we go to use it, it might not suck to have those things on hand. And you can buy them cheap. Springco ones, those are the ones I use. You get like a 9-pack for like $2. Primary Arms. Your extractor, the extractor spring and the pin itself that holds that in, those are about 4,000 to 5,000 round wear parts. Extractors break. They break all the time. If you shoot a lot of steel cased ammo through your AR, your extractor will fail sooner. Having a package of like 9 or 12 gas rings, and then having a couple of extractors, like a bolt rebuild kit. They Primary or Palmetto State makes those even. Have a couple of extractors, extractor pins, spring, and the O-ring, right? So you can do the crane mod. That 5,000, 4,000 to 5,000 rounds. But now at 5,000 rounds, we have other problems. The action spring. So you would know that as your buffer spring. Your buffer springs. So that is the action. That is what cycles the action of the firearm. That's a 5,000 round part. However, if you buy a Springco, Springcos have like 20,000 plus round life expectancy, 20,000 plus cycles. I run Springco in all my guns because it's literally you replace it when you hit the first 5,000 rounds and it's time to replace it, and you never replace it again. And they're about $17 a spring. They make them in different sizes. You have like white and black and green. Just make sure you get the one that goes to the action you have. Carbine length, carbine system. Having like a green one for your full size rifle stuff with rifle length gas system and full length buffer tube. You can use the green one in the A5 system or the Mark II system for BCM. They are awesome. but you need to have this stuff on hand. Next up, 10,000 rounds, and this one's kind of debatable for a lot of people. 10,000 rounds is typically where we're going to start seeing bolt carrier group failures. It is a metal object sliding on another metal object inside of a housing for 10,000 rounds, not to mention your countless dry fire reps, clearing the firearm, doing all your stuff, your maintenance where you're scrubbing on it and everything, scraping at it. Bolt carrier groups are one of those things that I will always have an extra of. When I go to the range and I go to a school, I may have a whole spare upper, I may have a spare rifle, but I always have a spare bolt carrier group with me in my range bag, so that if it fails, I can immediately swap it out. I don't have to rebuild anything. I just put it back in and go to work. So at about 7,500 rounds, that's when we're going to start really paying attention to things. We want to start paying attention to our bolt lugs. We want to start looking at the cam pin hole on the AR bolt itself. How about the firing pin? Check that out, because if we start denting and bending that firing pin, or we start having some fractures and cracks around the bolt lugs, that's a catastrophic failure waiting to happen that can take the gun out of the fight. Go ahead and replace that stuff preemptively, but typically for me at 10,000 rounds, I'm pulling the bolt carrier group completely. I'm going to go ahead and replace the whole thing. And then, so here's one that's source of much intrigue, and that is your barrel. So AR guys kind of don't understand how common it is to replace barrels for the most part. Most of your AR guys don't. If you're an AR guy that also shoots PRS or bench rest, you're well aware of how long barrels last because you don't get much life out of them. Barrels are entirely dependent, though, on your schedule of fire. So there's two big things that will make a difference in your AR barrel, aside from caliber, and that is the schedule of fire that you're running, one, and the material in which your barrel's made, two. How it's made, kind of important, but those two things are typically going to be what we see. A good high quality barrel can easily get you to 20,000 rounds. Easily. If you're running a more match profiled barrel, they may only guarantee it out 10,000 or 15,000 rounds. LaRue is a 10,000 round barrel, but that's at the point in which LaRue says your accuracy, I can no longer guarantee it's a sub-minute barrel at 10,000 rounds. That's what they're telling you. Does it mean it doesn't shoot? No. And personally, for me, if I was running a gun in SHTF, unless it starts keyholing or I'm starting to miss because of it, I'm leaving that barrel alone. But a lot of it is dependent on your schedule of fire. It's also dependent on the material. If you're running a chrome moly steel, that is a much harder thing. Typically with chrome moly steel, we're going to sacrifice some accuracy, but we're going to gain longevity. Same thing, cold hammer forged barrels that are chrome line are going to have a tremendous service life, 20, 30, 40,000 rounds sometimes. But we are going to sacrifice accuracy. Contradicting though, and on the other side of this, if we're running a 416 stainless barrel, a really hyper accurate barrel, like I've got several. If you're running a Douglas, if you're running a White Oak or something like that, you're running this barrel that's capable of a 1/2 inch group. You need to understand that your life expectancy on that barrel is probably 10 grand or less. Like you're going to burn that barrel out. You're not going to get out of it what it is, because typically we can make stainless barrels more accurate, but we can't make them last longer because the metal is softer itself. There's all kinds of stuff that goes into the barrel and the wear pattern, whether that is QPQ or nitride finishing, if we melanite for some of the other folks in the group, if that is us doing a DLC, if that's us doing chrome line. Like there are things that make barrels last longer, but we need to have a decision on how accurate is accurate enough. At what point are we hitting a law of diminishing returns? When is it too much where I could sacrifice the fact that I'm losing some accuracy, but I have an additional 10,000 rounds of barrel life? You know, we're not talking about short term. Think of this: if you woke up tomorrow and your money was no good and you have made it to your bug out location and you are doing the best you can to provide and survive for your family, I want a barrel that's going to last as long as humanly possible, but I'm still going to have an extra barrel. This is one I picked up recently. This is an Expo Arms, Primary Arms. I bought this. They did not send this to me. This is a 16-inch mid-length gas system, 1 in 7 twists, 0.076 gas port, so it's pretty good gas size. Medium contour, so it's a little heavier. It's going to deal with weight better. Chrome line chamber and bore. But the Expo Arms barrels are made by Roscoe, and Roscoe makes a bomb-proof, rock-solid barrel. It's a working man's barrel, right? We're not talking White Oak where we're spending $300 for a barrel. We're not talking Geisley where we're spending $354. We're not spending $400 on a criteria. We're not spending $7 on a proof. We're spending about $220-ish on sale, $140 for a barrel with 20,000 rounds of life, right? Here's the deal. When we talk about ARs, there's a lot of things. Like your receivers will last for freaking ever. Your charging handles will last forever. Your trigger springs are probably going to last forever. But your barrel, your bolt carrier group are going to wear and fail. They are the heart and soul of your rifle. Don't be caught lacking. Have backups for those things. Even if you're not a doomsdayer and you don't believe anything will ever happen, we can all agree that parts get really hard to find sometimes. And if you love to shoot, you might as well have this stuff with you. Something else we're going to do, really cheap option. Amazon has them. God, I'll leave a link to it if I can find it. It's a bore scope that actually attaches to your phone. I have one of those. I have access to a much nicer bore scope because I have actual gunsmith friends. I'm not a I'm more of a gunsmith, not a gunsmith. I'm an armorer, right? I do armor level maintenance and build outs on ARs, bolt guns, AR-10s, and handguns, Glock, Sig, 1911. Sometimes I have some advanced training in those worlds where we're talking about using things like 1911 zones to fix things. But I'm not a gunsmith. I'm not going to go in there and drill and tap things. That's not what I do. But I will take that little bore scope, and as I'm getting into that 10 to 12,000 round count, I will go down and look at my gas port. You can see if your gas port is actually eroding, because your gas port doesn't erode, just the hole doesn't get bigger and rounder. It actually grows into like a teardrop, so it becomes oblong and oval shape because it wears in this pattern because the bullet passes by. So we will see gas port erosion, and that is a good indicator of life. If your gas port is if your gas port looks like a OnlyFans bunghole, man, like it might be time, right? Or it's going to become ultra reliable. But something else you can think of with that is having heavier buffers, different springs, and being able to work within that to make that barrel life just a little longer, but still accurate. We can do that. But we got to stop thinking about these things in terms of, I bought it, I'm good forever. You're not. You bought it, you have to maintain it. This is a tool. You have to maintain tools. Just like your car. You wouldn't drive your car with no freaking oil in it unless you've got one of those electric vehicles, which if you have one of those electric vehicles, I don't know why you're on my channel. As the coal-fired plant and the nuke plant works up to charge the power so that you can charge your electric car, or you've got your generator on a trailer to charge your electric car. Things I don't understand. I don't get the electric vehicle thing at all. I always wondered in climate change why it's always incumbent upon America to make these very large, drastic changes that greatly impact like the 80% of the population that want to dick all to do with the situation. But we're like one of the least prominent offenders of a carbon footprint when China's over there doing whatever China does, right? Like if you want some fun, get on Instagram, go check out Habitual Line Crosser. If you guys have not checked him out, that dude is so funny. Oh my God, it's funny. That is my straight up poop entertainment for sure. Habitual Line Crosser. Good dude. I'll tag him in this if he's got a YouTube. He's a solid guy. He's on the Unsubscribed podcast sometimes too. So after that, we're going to talk about Sig. Sig, the new Army service pistol, carried by tons of people all over America right now. Some people think it's going to go off whenever it wants to. Guns don't go off unless you manipulate the trigger or you make them unsafe. That's a you problem, not a gun problem. I will say Sig needs to stop beta testing crap on people. For instance, this stupid optic cut that only fits this optic, which is like the worst optic you've ever created. I mean, it's super clear dot and it's fine for competition or concealed carry. But like what in God's name? No. Jesus. Knife hand. Anyway, so the Sig. And their finish is terrible. Like, you see that? This gun's got 10,000 rounds on it, and like it's got 10,000 rounds on it. I think it's 3 or 4 years old. So what are we talking about with the Sig? So believe it or not, Sig's got a pretty interesting maintenance schedule, and this is specifically for the 320s. So your recoil spring in the compact carry size. So this is an X carry. So we're talking something with that compact size barrel, that 4-inch barrel length, the M18, what have you. So we're talking about 5,000 rounds. 5,000 rounds, they want you to replace the recoil guide rod assembly. Sig does have a very different recoil guide rod assembly. They are running a braided and double spring setup. The double spring looks a lot like you would see in a Glock Gen 4 or above, but we actually have metal components and not a polymer inside, which is pretty cool. So now what if you don't have a compact? This is why I said their stuff's weird. So if you don't have a compact and maybe you've got a, maybe you're running a full size. So your full size for your recoil guide rod assembly is 10,000 rounds. That is a testament to the way that firearm slide handles the massive moving back and forth. That's really cool. That's a really well engineered thing. Glock is not known for modern advancements in engineering. This thing right here, aside from it being shaped a little different and finally having forward slide serrations, is not really different from a Gen 1 or Gen 2. They're just not. There's some moderate little tiny advancements here and there. This is an entirely new concept. Whether you love or hate Sig, I will tell you, I love this handgun. It shoots amazing. I adore it. Is it my 226? No. I freaking love my West German 226. That thing is awesome. It's got like 38,000 rounds on it. It's like my CZs. I've got CZs, like my original CZ75B has got 48,000 rounds on it, and I've got to send it to Cajun and have the whole thing rebuilt because it's beat. So at 10,000 rounds, when I say they simplified this, so at 10,000 rounds, we're going to replace the slide stop spring, our trigger bar, weird, right? The trigger spring and the extractor spring. We're going to replace all that at 10,000 rounds. Notice I said extractor spring, not extractor. So, true fact, C&H Precision, an affiliate of the channel, they were going to mill this gun for me. They were going to mill out the original Romeo footprint to the Delta Point Pro footprint so that I could run different optics. However, I was told when I was getting ready to tear it apart that they could not accept it and they would not mill it because Sig's metal hardness of their slide is so tough, it was destroying their tooling. So that's interesting knowledge. I found that very wild. I do love the Sig 320s. I love how modular they are. This is the Wilson Combat frame. I've had this Wilson Combat frame on here since 2019 when it was released. This is excellent. This totally changes the game. This is the original X carry. I have the 1811 on my full-size version, as well, not my full-size, my X Compact, the one that actually had dovetailed sights. I have that on there. That one's got a Delta Point Pro cut that I don't run a Delta Point Pro on. And then at 20,000 rounds, so Glock is like, yeah, I mean, 15,000 rounds, you need to replace this. At 20,000 rounds, Sig says, well, we need to replace our takedown lever spring. We need to actually go in and replace the extractor assembly, which is very easy to do. The extractor assembly pops right out the side, much like a Glock. And then I need to replace the fire control unit, pins and springs. This is where we hit an issue with Sig, though. Replacing parts of the fire control unit is advanced armorer level territory. The average guy at home with a YouTube video is not doing that. It is much more in depth. It can be done, but it is much more in depth. Here's the deal. Glock is the Honda Civic and absolutely the most user serviceable firearm on the freaking planet. Funny enough, so this is the 45. So this is a full-size grip with a compact slide. The X Carry is a full-size grip with a compact slide. So I have a 3.98-inch barrel and a 4.02-inch barrel. Both 17-round capacity. I love them both. I adore both guns. I truly do. I'm not one of those people that's going to... If you guys want to see an actual video on my legit thoughts between these with a true comparison on the range, let me know. I'll go do that. That would actually be a lot of fun because they are way more similar than people realize. But the Sig. So the way the Sig is built, these are incredibly robust systems. The parts that we wear and break, like the recoil guide rod assembly, like the takedown, like the slide stop, because some of this stuff, the extractor, these things are built ultra robust. They're far more robust than Glock. Here's the deal, though. So Sig, we see a good aftermarket support for Sig. Lots of people make parts for it, but it is not as just ubiquitous as the Glock ecosystem. Glock is the most customizable, user serviceable, actual duty grade handgun. Not a competition gun. Glock makes duty grade guns that you can use for competition. Glock makes bomb-proof freaking solutions to problems. Polygonal rifling. That means, that's why you can't use lead, because it accrues inside of the actual channels that are made for the rifling, so you run into problems. These barrels, I've got one Glock. It is a Gen 2 Glock 17. I have fired 58,000 rounds on it. And the guy that had it before me that I bought it from was the original owner, and he put 86,000 documented rounds that he had track of. He said it probably could have as many as 10,000 rounds more. So we're talking about a handgun that's got in excess, very, very close to 150,000 rounds on it. And aside from the standard maintenance of the extractor being replaced, the slide stop, we had to replace the locking block, the takedown locks. We had to replace all that, the springs for that, all the springs on the inside, and the trigger bar that got bent. But the barrel's original. And if I vice that gun up, that barrel shoots just as good as my Gen 4, Gen 3s, right? It just does. You're not going to kill a handgun barrel. You're not going to kill a handgun barrel. One more time. You're not going to kill a handgun barrel. You know why? Because handgun rounds as a whole are low pressure, very not over. The only overboard calibers for a handgun is like 357 Sig. And for those of you that don't know, overboard is the chamber is bigger than the bullet going down the thing. Straight wall cartridges have an obscene life expectancy for those. That's one of the reasons 308 is so good. Like, I have 308 bolt guns that are still shooting sub-minute that have 9, 10, and 11,000 rounds on them. You know why that's possible? Because I'm not burning a metric buttload of powder, and I'm also not incredibly overboard chamber into the actual barrel itself. That said, I have a 300 Win Mag. I shoot predominantly Mark 248 out of it, which is 190 grain Sierra Match King. That barrel is good for about 3,900 rounds, and it's got to be replaced. 6.5 Creedmoor for me, 7,000 rounds, and I got to spin that barrel off and put a new one on it. It's just how it is. That's the way it works. 308, good. I mean, 15,000 rounds, right? That's one of the reasons the AR-10 is a viable platform for me, is because it does last for so long. The AR-15, right? We're not burning enough powder in quantity, even at a higher firing schedule, to do real serious damage to that thing, even though we're firing a spicy little 22, right? You can see some of that issue with the 224 Valkyrie. I am curious if we will see any of that with the 22 ARC. I have not noticed anything going wrong with my 6 ARC. My 6 ARC just crossed the 5,000 round mark. You guys want to see my 6 ARC, let me know. That'd be fun one to take you guys to the range. I'm currently waiting on my long distance range to reopen. The lease was just re-signed, and I have 2,000 yard capability out there, so I can have some fun with you guys if you guys want to see it. So that's the thing. You're not going to kill it. So don't be buying Glock replacement barrels under the assumption that, it's losing accuracy. It's not. You're not going to hurt that freaking barrel, right? There are reasons. Comps, suppressors. You just want to, it's cool. I'm fine with that. Be cool. Conversion, like you want to do a 40 cal and turn it with a lone wolf conversion to a 9mm. Fine. Dude, be you. That's awesome. It's America. Do your thing. Reality, though, with the Glock is, with very minimal training and instructions, even you can rip this thing down to bare springs and draw parts. The replacement parts are ridiculously expensive. For Gen 3, Gen 4, so for this guy, the trigger spring for this guy is $1.96. The magazine release spring for this or for this is $1.89. My takedown bar right here and spring is like $5. I can buy a locking block for like $5. My entire extractor plunger, spring-loaded bearing system, and the extractor, I can buy all of that for like $4.90 or $5. You can buy factory Glock triggers with trigger bars for like $14. It is not expensive to maintain. Everything right down to the ejector, which is a separate part, to your main trigger assembly housing unit back here to connectors. The most expensive part of that equation is like $14 for your connector. It is insanely inexpensive to keep in stock parts to maintain these. And I've said it before. Your handgun in an SHTF situation, even as uncertain as the world is today, is a first line, true blue best friend that can save your life. Make it run right. You don't have to dump $3,000 to make this. And in fact, I have another Glock 45 MOS that is sitting bone stock. And I'm going to take you guys through building a secondary version of this gun. Why, you might ask? Even as law enforcement, if I get into a shooting, I'm going to lose this for 6 months until all the investigation's done. It's just true. It's how it happens. That means all of it. The aim point, the light, the comp, it's all gone. So it behooves me to have a second one. It will have an acro as well. It'll have an acro tan, and then it'll have a tan turbo on the front of it. I won't be doing the radiant comp on it, though. I might do a Parker mount to see what's up. But it is very easy to maintain these and keep them running. And you can, like I said, $50 in parts, and I can literally rebuild this whole thing. The only thing I will say to you is if you are rebuilding this whole thing, have at least 2 striker channel liners, right? Have those with you because they break. Don't buy the stupid brass ones. Buy the real those, and have a firing pin or a striker channel installation and removal tool. It's like $5 at Primary Arms. Have one of those. Have your basic Glock tool, the punch, and the front sight thing. Have a good sight pusher. I can literally strip this down to nothing and put it back together. $50 worth of parts, and I can completely rebuild the guts of this gun to factory brand new. This is the easiest thing you'll ever have to maintain and the most cost effective. This is a very easy system to maintain until we start messing with the fire control unit. But all in all, we're still talking about fire control unit is 20,000 plus rounds. Some people will never shoot 20,000 rounds between all their platforms. And then again, when we talk about rifles, your barrel and your bolt carrier group, the most expensive, most important, absolute beating heart of your system, you need a spare bolt carrier group, a spare bolt probably, gas rings, gas key, all that. And then you need a really solid barrel. Just keep in mind when you buy your barrel, stainless isn't going to last longer, but typically will be more accurate. Cold hammer forged chrome line is the most longest lasting, indestructible barrel you're going to put in your gun, but you're going to pay for that indestructibleness. Buy it with accuracy. It's not going to be as accurate. It's just not. Having a good chrome moly barrel that is nitrided with maybe a chrome line chamber, yeah, dude, we're finna shoot that for like 20,000, 30,000 rounds. I have the oldest AR barrel I have right now has got 38 or 40,000 rounds on it. It is definitely not shooting sub MOA. So, but buy a decent barrel. Like I said, these are Expo Arms made. These are Primary Arms' in-house company, but all of their stuff is made by high-end reliable manufacturers. I have one of the Expo Arms uppers that's made by Mega. It's awesome. These are made by Roscoe, which is who makes the barrel for Sage Dynamics rifle. So guys, I am Uncle Freedom. There's a look of guns last forever, right? No, they don't. You got to take care of your stuff. I just wanted to let you know kind of when we're supposed to be replacing these parts, what parts you should look to have on hand. I will tell you, buying all your replacement parts for your SIG to do what you need to do is going to cost about $105. Buying all the parts to respring this is going to cost like $50. There is a price difference there. It's just how it is. Keep an eye out. Primary Arms has some really good deals. I think barrels are on sale right now and bolt carrier groups. That's a really solid deal. Go check those guys out. You can actually find the FN Cold Hammer Forged Chrome line barrels at that are made for Palmetto State Armory. You can find those sometimes for like $140, and that's an FN barrel. It's a machine gun barrel that will last like 30,000 rounds. Keep in mind your firing schedule is directly related to how long your stuff lasts. Handguns, not so much of a thing. But guys, you need to have this stuff on hand. Most people don't. But if this is your world and our government is stupid, need to make sure we have the parts to ensure we stay in the fight like good little patriots. So guys, I am Uncle Freedom. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Until next time, I'll see you later.